negotiating this integration. Your network infrastructure would power every Whitmore property across the globe. This contract benefits both of us. Danielle nodded once. Financially, yes, she said. But partnerships aren't built only on profit. Victoria Whitmore leaned forward impatiently. This is ridiculous, she said sharply. You're canceling a $700 million agreement because of a piece of cake? Danielle looked directly at her. No, she replied. I'm canceling it because of what happened after the cake. That answer confused several people in the room. Ethan scoffed loudly. You're overreacting, he muttered. Danielle's eyes moved briefly toward him. Perhaps, she said calmly. But leadership often reveals itself in small moments. Marcus Reed stood and quietly handed Danielle a tablet. She glanced at the screen for only a second before setting it down. Then she looked back at Richard Whitmore. I believe your legal department will receive formal notice tomorrow morning. The shock on Richard's face hardened into anger. Danielle, you're making a mistake, he said. Do you realize how many companies would kill for a contract with us? Danielle gave a slight smile. Yes, she said, and yet none of them will control the infrastructure powering your entire hospitality network. The subtle reminder landed heavily. Without Nexus Grid's security architecture, the Whitmore expansion into smart hotel systems would stall for years. Cameras flashed rapidly now, journalists whispered. Ethan looked uneasy for the first time. But Danielle wasn't finished. She stepped closer to the Whitmore table and spoke in a tone that carried through the silent ballroom. Let me tell you something my father taught me when I was 10 years old, she said. He said success isn't measured by how powerful you are when everyone respects you. It's measured by how you treat someone when you think they have to tolerate your disrespect. No one spoke. Danielle placed the cake-stained napkin on the table. Tonight answered that question for me. She turned toward the exit. Her executive team stood immediately and followed her. As she walked across the marble floor, the ballroom remained silent except for the quiet clicking of camera shutters capturing the moment the Whitmore Empire's biggest deal vanished. Behind her, Ethan Whitmore muttered nervously, Dad, she's bluffing, right? But Richard Whitmore wasn't smiling anymore, because deep down, he knew something his son didn't yet understand. Danielle Carter never bluffed. The first thing everyone noticed was the silence. It happened in the middle of the grand ballroom of the Lexington Crown Hotel, where crystal chandeliers hung like frozen fireworks above hundreds of the most powerful executives in New York. Waiters moved quietly between tables with silver trays. Investors whispered about numbers that could change industries overnight, and cameras from business magazines captured every handshake between billionaires. It was supposed to be the celebration dinner before the signing of a $700 million partnership between the Whitmore family's luxury hospitality empire and a rising tech infrastructure company led by one of the most respected CEOs in the country. But before anyone realized what was happening, a slice of chocolate cake flew across the room. It hit the woman standing near the center of the ballroom directly on the shoulder, smearing dark frosting across her elegant white suit. Gasps rippled across the crowd. The room froze. And then, unbelievably, laughter followed. Not nervous laughter, real laughter. The kind that came from people who thought something humiliating was entertaining. Standing near one of the decorated banquet tables was a young man in a tailored tuxedo, maybe 22 years old, with a smug grin on his face. He was Ethan Whitmore, the only son of billionaire hotel magnate Richard Whitmore. Ethan held an empty dessert plate in one hand and shrugged dramatically, as if he had just performed a harmless prank. Relax, he said loudly enough for half the ballroom to hear. It's just cake. Several of his friends chuckled. His mother, Victoria Whitmore, sitting nearby in diamonds and emerald silk, covered her mouth while laughing softly. Richard Whitmore himself shook his head with amused disappointment rather than anger, like a father watching his son make a mischievous joke. But the woman standing in the center of the room did not laugh. She didn't shout. She didn't wipe the cake off immediately either. She simply looked at Ethan Whitmore with a calm expression that somehow made the silence heavier. The frosting slowly slid down the sleeve of her jacket. Her name was Danielle Carter, and she was the CEO whose signature would determine whether the Whitmore Empire secured the largest technology integration contract in the luxury hotel industry. Cameras were still rolling. Executives exchanged uneasy looks, because anyone who knew Danielle Carter understood something important about her reputation. She never reacted emotionally in public. That was why she had built her company, Nexus Grid Technologies. From a tiny cybersecurity startup into a billion-dollar infrastructure network powering airports, financial exchanges, and government systems across 3 continents. Danielle finally reached for a napkin from a nearby table and gently wiped frosting from her sleeve. Her voice, when she spoke, was quiet, but the ballroom went completely silent to hear it. "Mr. Whitmore," she said, looking directly at Ethan, "was that meant to be funny?" Ethan rolled his eyes and laughed again. "Come on, don't make it dramatic," he replied. "It's a party." A few people shifted uncomfortably. Danielle studied him for another moment. Then she looked toward Richard Whitmore, who stood slowly from his seat with a charming smile, clearly prepared to smooth things over. "Danielle," Richard said smoothly, spreading his hands, "boys will be boys." Ethan gets a little carried away at celebrations. Some guests forced polite laughter. Danielle nodded once. Then she asked a simple question that would soon send shockwaves through the room. "Mr. Wetmore," she said, "do you believe respect is optional when money is involved?" Richard chuckled lightly, as if dismissing the seriousness of the moment. "Let's not ruin the evening over a dessert accident," he said. But Danielle didn't respond immediately. Instead, she turned toward the long table where several members of her legal and executive team were seated. They were already watching carefully. One of them, her chief financial officer Marcus Reed, subtly closed the folder that contained the contract scheduled to be signed that night. The $700 million deal. The entire ballroom felt the tension shift. Danielle looked back at the Whitmore family. "You're right about one thing," she said calmly. "This evening shouldn't be ruined over dessert." Ethan smirked triumphantly, as if he had won some kind of argument. But then Danielle added 6 words that drained the color from Richard Whitmore's face. "Which is why we won't sign tonight." The silence that followed felt heavier than the chandeliers above them. Investors leaned forward. Reporters lifted cameras. Richard blinked in confusion. "I'm sorry?" he asked. Danielle's voice remained calm. "Nexus Grid Technologies will not be moving forward with the partnership agreement with Whitmore International Hotels." A stunned murmur swept through the ballroom. Ethan's smile faded slightly. Richard Whitmore laughed in disbelief. "Danielle, you can't be serious. We've spent 8 months,